Well, good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acomb, and we're still getting used to the 2 hours here on the air, broadcasting live from the Heastie studio, already receiving a virtual wave on this rainy morning. We have a lot to cover. As always, we're going to start with, I guess, a sad note. I just heard it this morning, and I'd be shocked if you do not remember this man, but Joe Flaherty has passed away at the age of 82. There he is, known for being really a comedy legend, original cast member of SCTV. His daughter said that he passed away Monday after a brief illness. Dad was an extraordinary man known for his boundless heart and his unwavering passion for movies from the 40s and 50s. His insight into the golden age of cinema didn't just shape his professional life, they were also a source of endless fascination for me. In these last few months, as he faced his health challenges, we had the precious opportunity to watch many of those classic movies together, moments I will forever hold dear. Now, he was in SCTV. That's a lot of movies with John Candy. He was also phenomenal as the father in Freaks and Geeks, if you've ever seen that. He's also in Back to the Future Part 2. But, I mean, he was a part of that original legendary cast of SCTV. John Candy is the one that I mentioned, the movies that he did so many with. Just, if you don't recognize him, I would be shocked. So we, sadly, mourn the passing of Joe Flaherty. Dying at 82, he's survived by his young brother, Paul, who wrote for SCTV and other shows like Muppets Tonight, and his children, Gabriel and Gudrun. He's married to Judith Flaherty for 20 years until their divorce in 96. So just passing that along. I promise every morning will not start with the news of someone passing. This has been a trend. But I just wanted to mention that to you. Yesterday was the primary for president. You may or may not have been aware. I know when I went in my district at about, probably about 1 o'clock, I was the 18th person to vote. So not what you would call a barn burner of a turnout, but not a surprise. You have Biden and Trump both securing the delegate counts they need. So really it was kind of just going through the motions. But if you are curious, out of Connecticut, because we were not the only ones to vote, out of Connecticut, Donald Trump secured 77.9% of the votes. Now, it's interesting because I was flipping around this morning as I was preparing for the show for some news, and, they're trying to highlight the fact that he didn't get all the votes. He didn't get 100%. But if you look at, let's say, for instance, Joe Biden in Connecticut, he received 84.8%. So he had 11.5% uncommitted. Now, I will say, just if you're curious about Connecticut, let's read through the numbers quickly. Donald Trump at 77.9%, Nikki Haley at 13.9%, uncommitted 4.8%, DeSantis at 2.9%, and I've got to admit, I don't know who this is, Ryan Binkley at 0.5%. Now, on the Democrat side in Connecticut, Joe Biden at 84.8%, uncommitted at 11.5%, and then the rest are, Marianne Williamson 2.3%. Out of Wisconsin, Joe Biden getting 88.6% of the vote. I don't know what this means. Uninstructed, 8.4%. Now, out of Wisconsin on the Republican side, Trump receiving 79.2% with Nikki Haley receiving 12.8%. Now, I know a lot in the media are going to tell you that Nikki Haley 12.8%, those people never, ever, ever go to Trump. I have my doubts on that. I'm sure there will be some. But as we know, much of Nikki Haley's supporters, this is not a knock on Nikki Haley, but many of her supporters leaned more maybe Democratic, independent. Will they end up pulling the lever? And I think it's a question I'll pose to you. Will they end up pulling the lever for Joe Biden as compared to Trump, just because they supported Nikki Haley and all this? Is that obviously, I think many would deem a somewhat protest vote. And I don't have New York in front of me, but it went exactly as you would expect. Both Trump and Biden winning yesterday's primary. I was just trying to see if I could find it for you quickly, and I cannot. So it's tough to find results when it's not all that interesting. There we go. Donald Trump in New York receiving 82.1% of the votes. That means he gets all 91 delegates. Nikki Haley, 12.9% of the vote. Chris Christie 4.0, and Ramaswamy 1.0 out of nope, they don't, and they don't show Democrats. Why would they? Boy, tough to find the coverage. But there's your quick update this morning, as if you were now already aware of where that was headed, of what was going to happen in that race. Did you get out and vote? What was the turnout? Now, Biden, here we go, of New York, receiving, well, of Delaware, but in the New York vote, 91.5%, Marianne Williamson 4.9%, and Dean Phillips 3.6%. We do not have the totals there on what were they calling it, the uncommitted vote. But it wasn't uncommitted. It was just to leave it blank. So that was a kind of a protest vote that will take a lot of time before we see the actual numbers. And I think for those people trying to protest in that way, they made kind of a tactical error on that, only because I don't know if that will be reported as thoroughly as it would if there's another way to do this. That protest vote, if you were not aware, is because of Biden's response to Israel and the terrorist attack on Israel and the preceding war after the fact, which, by the way, is making headlines after that tragic error by Israel hitting those aid workers. Biden took it as an opportunity to criticize Israel, many others. We may get to that a little bit later on. We have a lot to get to, and we have 2 hours, so let's just sit back and relax. I don't have to rush. I just wanted to give you the updates on the primaries, even though I'm pretty sure you knew what the answer was going to be before I went on and read those numbers. All right. Bear with me, because it's my favorite time of the program for some reason. Boy, this took a weird turn, too. Tiffany Henyard, the super mayor. If you're new to the program or you missed the programs where I've talked about this lady, I try to bring it up to highlight the importance of voting for, or knowing who you're voting for when it comes to local elections, for doing the research. Now, in full disclosure, we all know it is getting more and more difficult to find that information as media dwindles. So it's not as in the old days where you would maybe have a debate televised, or where you'd have meet the candidates in the newspaper or events for whatever reason. Well, I know media-wise, but even when it comes to like town hall formats, seem to become less and less throughout the year. So it does become really, you're dependent on their Facebook pages or their political websites, which is obviously going to have a spin to it. But that's just a side, pardon me, tangent. So now, I did not know this part of it. Tiffany Henyard, she's being called the Dalton dictator. It's been fascinating to watch because she's just allegedly spent all this taxpayer money on lavish trips, hairstylist, if I recall, or makeup artist for herself. But now there's even a sexual assault component to this. Let me give you a little bit of background on this. A mob of furious Illinoisians demanded Monday the self-described super mayor, Tiffany Henyard, resign from her post as the Dalton dictator, battles simultaneous sexual assault and money embezzlement scandals. Pardon me. The village of Dalton's monthly board meeting delved into chaos as a swarm of 100 people banged on the door as dozens of others testified against Henyard, leading the 4 trustees to walk out. You know what you're doing. You're violating our rights, and that's a shame, one resident testified. This is a disgrace that you have done to this village. They say you're the worst mayor in America, and I agree. You've done nothing. You don't care about nobody but yourself. Those are exact quotes. What I thought was interesting, when they started to look at how much money was really just hemorrhaging with how much she was spending, they voted on the board to do an audit. She vetoed that vote, which is probably a red flag. I know I found this fascinating. I did not know there was a sexual assault component to this until recently, well, until this morning when I saw this article. The board has been scheduled to address Henyard's veto of an investigation into her alleged misuse of taxpayer money for lavish trips and her own $1 million police detail. Now, if you recall, she was putting up taxpayer-funded posters of herself all over town. That's where she gets the reputation for being the Dalton dictator, that and the spending. Last month, she shot down a resolution passed unanimously by the 4-person village board to open the probe, calling on her to submit the village's financial records and invite the FBI to conduct its own investigation. Got a frog in my throat this morning. I think it's due to weather. I apologize. The meeting didn't run beyond the public speaking portion of the agenda, however, after police emptied the room over what they said were credible threats. 4 trustees who voted in favor of the investigation into Henyard said the move was a violation of their constitutional rights to participate in the meeting and walked out in protest. A decision Henyard chastised as only adding to the chaos. She's been very good. She does not back down from what she feels. And when I say very good, I mean it in the most disturbing political way possible. She does never get sheepish. She does not feel embarrassment, it seems. Henyard said before adjourning, "Our job is to make sure we take care of business and not allow the business to handle us." Now, Henyard's 3-year tenure has been plagued by corruption accusations, which ramped up in recent weeks after she admitted to a $2 million deficit, with Dolton owing more than $427,000 for street paving and another $400,000 for tree trimming services. The Board of Trustees accused her of fudging the estimate by millions and covering up personal expenses she made using village money. "Why can't we have transparency with what's going on with our tax dollars?" one constituent demanded. Henyard is also, this is the new part. Henyard is also facing a sexual harassment and retaliation complaint by a former employee who accused the mayor of firing her after claiming she was sexually assaulted during a work trip in Las Vegas last year. "You know what happened in Vegas, you know what happened, and you should be addressing it," one resident said. Now, the mayor has denied all accusations of wrongdoing, claiming last month that the storm of allegations is nothing more than a smear campaign to oust a female politician. One vocal community member who initially backed Henyard told the Post in February that it was a vote I regret deeply. That goes back to the point I'm making, finding out the truth about these candidates. When she got into office, she just shut everyone out and she went into the opposite direction. She became this tyrant and dictator. So that is just to highlight how important it is to vote in local races, and that's why I find it the duty of, frankly speaking, to have on as many candidates as we can, to hear from them, to find out where they stand on the issues so mistakes like that are not made. We have to take our first break. I know we're covering some wacky stuff this morning, but we've got a lot of important issues to get to, so stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Man, it's one of those mornings. We're running around. And we still have 2 hours. Imagine if this was 1 hour. Oh, boy. Playing catch up this morning. And I thank you so much for joining us as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. One last, and I promise I'll stop on this, but humor me. One last example of why you should focus on who you're voting for and know who you're voting for in all races, but also specifically in the local elections, because those are the ones that can directly affect you the most. A mother of 5 out of Texas has found herself in a little hot water. She learned that she could go to jail over library books. Kaylee Morgan took out books about Vincent van Gogh from Navasota Public Library in Grimes County, Texas, back in March of 23. She believes she returned all the books, but she did remember one didn't fit properly into the return box. Anyway, court documents obtained by Fox News Digital show that the combined value of the 2 books was about $60. So the 2 books they claim she never returned, $60. But she was slapped with a bill of $569.50, which were mostly fines, of course, and, get this, court fees. She was also charged with a city ordinance violation. She received a document saying, "Warrant is active for your arrest. Act now to avoid going to jail." She was unaware of that document. That isn't even the issue at hand, in my opinion. She found out when she was at the DMV, and she couldn't renew her license because they had a warrant out for her arrest. Morgan called the local court to see what the trouble was and was told that she had 2 past due library books. It's so silly, so silly. I have a warrant out for my arrest for past due library books. Okay, this is not fake. This is not made up. Anyway, listen. She's obviously got a GoFundMe page. Everything's going to be okay. She says that the response from the community is mostly overwhelmingly positive. There are a few who don't understand that I did turn the book in, and others who think I'm doing a smear campaign. It just, sometimes you can't make things like that up, and I wanted to pass it along to you because remember, there's always that Barney Fife mentality when some people get into elected office where the power goes to their head. And again, that's why you have to try your best. I'm not lecturing you, but I think we all could do better in knowing who we're voting for at the end of the day. Hey, speaking of local, let's take a look at some local news, shall we? This is a positive story as I get away from some of these other stories. I received this from Steuben County, and our friend Sheriff Jim Allard is involved in this. The swift response of Steuben County deputies during an early morning tractor-trailer rollover on I-86 overpass in the town of Avoca saved a life and prevented catastrophic complications, according to Sheriff Allard. Deputies Brian Harrison and Ryan Andrews quickly assessed the scene of the terrifying crash around 4 a.m. on March the 4th and began calling for resources to stabilize the vehicle and extract the driver. The operator of the truck was still in the cab and screaming for help, Allard said. They also called for additional resources to shut down the highway below the overpass, which was in danger of falling debris from the overturned tractor-trailer. Allard told the Steuben County Legislature the calm, professional manner with which both deputies communicated and de-escalated the panicked driver and ensured that a secondary incident did not occur below led to the driver's and the vehicle's safe removal from a complicated crash scene. I commend Deputy Ryan Andrews and Deputy Brian Harrison for their professionalism, leadership, and service. Not only did they recognize the critical nature of this crash, they provided calm leadership towards a successful and safe resolution. So I wanted, we've been talking so often about crime and public safety and really the attack on police, not just physically the attack on police and the tragic story of the NYPD officer that lost his life. We talk about it in that sense, but we also talk about it when you see coverage, you see what Heastie was saying, which we'll get to a little bit more of that later on in the program, saying that, punishment isn't really deterrent when it comes to crime, just that mindset. Michael Goodwin has a fantastic piece on that today. The mindset that is really overcome many on the left, which is that defund the police attitude. So we want to, as much as possible, pass along to you stories that, maybe the mainstream media, the legacy media, doesn't always find time to report on because they want to focus on the negatives. We have to take another break, but we have 3 or 4 New York issues. We're going to talk about Trump, a little bit about RFK Jr., maybe some things about Biden. We have some international stories, and I hate to bring this up to not scare tactic, but to scare you this morning. Coming out of the Sun, and also it was reported, I believe it's CNN. I saw it on Drudge Report. Iran may launch an October 7th style revenge massacre in Israel after embassy strike, and even hit targets in the United Kingdom as World War III fears soar. Iran is poised to launch a terrifying October 7th style revenge attack in Israel and could then turn its eyes to targets in the UK. Experts say the chilling warning comes after Israel allegedly blasted a consulate in Syria, killing 7, including a top Tehran general. Experts have warned that a future retaliation by Iran, which is well known to have backed terrorist groups including Hezbollah and Houthis rebels, would spark a global war. They claimed Russia, China, and North Korea could stand by their pals in Iran in any future conflict involving the country. Hence the World War III aspect to it. And we know that China, I understand the president talked with China, President Xi. We may talk about that as well. But when you add some of these things together, I know we've went all over the place from kind of laughable to very serious this morning. And it's only 20 minutes in, but it is definitely scary times when you hear, when you think about that too. We've talked about the power moves by China and Russia really to become the world's superpowers, wanting to take over that responsibility from America. They believe, as we heard from former Congressman Tom Reed not that long ago, they believe it's already checkmate. But I don't know. I don't think they've got the power yet, but I think if you look at Taiwan and some of the things that they could do, It is a very troubling time. And now if they were, meaning Russia, China, North Korea, to back Iran, if they were to start an attack like this, we could see one heck of an international conflict. So why don't we take a break on that note? I apologize. We'll be right back. We're Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Heastie studio. Thank you so much again for joining us in the 6 o'clock hour. I think we're doing pretty good of getting into the swing of things here on the 6 o'clock hour. I forgot one of them. Here we go. I'm your host, Frank Acomb. This is Frankly Speaking. We're broadcasting live from the Heastie studio, and we are talking just about everything. Comment from a viewer. Problem with Iran, are Obama and Biden's fault? Where the pallets of money come from? You remember that Obama gave? That's a very good point. Thank you for that reminder. But I think there is something to really take serious there. I know we talked about it before on the program. I know a lot of people have had comments in this manner. But there's such different... Ever since the withdrawal from Afghanistan, we've showed that weakness as America, and Biden has continued down that path. So I think there's a real concern that you could see China take advantage of us when it comes to Taiwan. And I didn't even plan on mentioning this unless we had time at the end, but since it ties in, and if you're just joining us, Iran may launch an October 7th style revenge massacre in Israel after embassy strike, and even hit targets in the UK as World War III fears soar. So Biden informed his Chinese counterpart, Xi Jinping, of the U.S. position on several issues during a call yesterday where President Xi's response was essentially, get out of town. Now, he didn't use those exact terms. Biden emphasized the importance of peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait, the rule of law and freedom of navigation in the South China Sea, and America's commitment to denuclearizing North Korea. And he raised concerns over, of course, climate change, China's support for Russia's defense industrial base, and its unfair trade policies, etc., etc. Yet, Xi, per Beijing's readout afterwards, stressed that Taiwan was a red line that must not be crossed. He threatened that in the face of supposed U.S. efforts to encourage Taiwan's independence, China is not going to sit on its hands. Xi accused Washington of adopting a string of measures to suppress China's trade and technology development and slapping Chinese entities with sanctions, which is creating risks. If Washington insists on containing China's high-tech development and depriving China of its legitimate right to development, China is not going to sit back and watch. Indeed, the two nations could slide, this is a quote, slide into conflict. Now, which side's readout is more accurate? Each side reports on it. What Biden said is coming from Biden's office. What President Xi said is coming from his office. We'll consider the respective records on this issue. And I thought this was a really good point from the New York Post editorial board, and that's why I mentioned it to tie in with that news story. China provokes Taiwan incessantly, sends fentanyl ingredients to Mexico. And there's that book out that suggests that without China, there is no fentanyl, meaning that they are the producers of fentanyl. And so that any fentanyl that is found even locally has a tie back to China. But I'll continue. Utterly abandons its treaty promises to let freedom ring in Hong Kong, deploys spy balloons over America, aids Russia in its war on Ukraine, claims the South China Sea is its territory, pumps ever more carbon into the air despite John Kerry's pleas. The list is positively endless. Biden, on the other hand, let's talk about what Biden's done. He has taken not one meaningful public step that's led to China to stand down. The White House didn't even let Americans know about the spy balloon until regular citizens spotted it. That is a really good point, one that I'd forgotten. There is such a fear, and it's not just with Biden, amongst so many politicians, because there's so much money involved when you're talking about China and that market. Look at these Hollywood movies that are edited to appease China because they don't want to lose that market. It all goes back, and I know this is nothing new. I'm not saying anything groundbreaking here, but follow the money, right? It all goes back to the money. But continuing, maybe Beijing has damning dirt on the Biden family's multi-million-dollar businesses, and its business dealing, I should say, in China. Or perhaps the president plays rabbit simply because he always fears overseas escalation. Whether it's words or actions, the bottom line remains. President Xi bullies and Biden just blathers. I thought that was a good way of kind of encompassing what we've been talking about for quite some time. And you do go back. I know a lot of people point to this, but the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan leading the way to this type of, I don't know, sign of weakness and this type of provocation and kind of poking us in the chest. And then you see, unfortunately, and let's face it, we saw it coming when it comes to President Biden. We were, what's the word I want to look for? I don't even want to say cautiously optimistic because we know which direction it was going, but it was nice at first to see his strong stance supporting Israel. And then because of public pressure by his own party, because of votes here in the United States, he decides to, for all intents and purposes, abandon Israel and their support and in their goal of defeating Hamas. And if you look at his little speech yesterday about the aid workers that were killed, the civilian deaths, Biden blamed Israel. And as not just he, but the media has been doing, don't even really mention Hamas, very rarely mention Hamas. This war could be over this second if Hamas withdrew, if not withdrew, but if Hamas quit, so to speak. If they were, they are literally the one that started this on October 7th. Israel made it strong that they are going to wipe out Hamas. Hamas has kept the hostages, and there's never a right time of day, but it's too early to read, and you can find it yourself, a piece at the New York Post of some of what's happening to those hostages. But Biden issued a statement late yesterday in response to the accidental killing of 7 aid workers in Gaza by an Israel airstrike, blaming Israel for aid disruptions and claiming Israel is not doing enough to protect civilians. Biden's statement barely mentions Hamas, neither its tactic of using civilians as human shields, nor its practice of stealing humanitarian aid. The tragic airstrike was targeting an armed Hamas member who was not present. In his statement, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, he said, "This is a major reason why distributing humanitarian aid in Gaza has been so difficult, because Israel has not done enough to protect aid workers trying to deliver desperately needed help for civilians. Incident like yesterday simply should not happen. Israel has also not done enough to protect civilians." I mean, if you look at how strategic they actually try to be in war, like Benjamin Netanyahu said, unfortunately things like this happen in war. But as I've said time and time again, and as you've heard others say, it's no longer about Israel winning. It's no longer about destroying Hamas or protecting Israel in general. It's about, sadly, votes come November. And that's why he's seen those things like the uncommitted campaign during the primary, or who knows what it's going to look like here in New York with leaving it blank. But that's been to push and weaken his stance, I should say, on Israel. And it terrifies him at a time when his poll numbers are not that great. So it's not about Israel and our ally Israel. It is about November. It's sad. All right, stay with us. I did not plan on going international right off the jump this morning, but we did. We've covered a lot. That's why you have to start tuning in, or you are. You're watching now. That's why it's best to tune in starting at 6 a.m. I wanted to mention tomorrow on the program, former Congressman Joe Sempolinski will be our guest for the full hour and 7 o'clock hour, and he is going to be in studio. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I have a couple other kind of cool interviews coming up. First, our friend Joe from Crystal Chords. You'll recall Crystal Chords being a major part of our program on Christmas morning, but also the Salvation Army Telethon. Well, they've got a concert coming up. We're going to find out all about that on Friday. Also, just kind of a stranger one, I'm going to talk. I have an interview, not strange one, interesting one. Interview coming up about Glenn Miller Orchestra. You have to wait and see what that's all about. And then we're working on it because we don't know exactly what's happening in Albany. I will keep you updated as best as I can. Assemblyman Phil Palmisano may be in Friday to give us an update. If that's the case, I'll let you know as soon as I know. We are in the works, but everything's a little fluid right now in Albany, as you can imagine. Though I do have a piece here that asks the question, and I'll ask it to you too. What will come first, the budget or the solar eclipse? And I think the easy answer on that is the solar eclipse, which means we'll have another delay because tomorrow is the deadline that Governor Hochul moved the April 1st deadline to. So we'll talk about that when we come back. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Sorry there. We had a little bit of a technical glitch for just a few seconds. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Thank you for joining us in the 6 o'clock hour. We still have plenty to get to. Be a part of the discussion. You see the number on the bottom of your screen. Love to hear you and your opinion as you weigh in on all the issues of the day. Okay. Hey, speaking of Assemblyman Phil Palmisano, who I mentioned in the last segment, he was on Capitol Tonight because Monday kicked off National Donate Life Month. And as you know, the Assemblyman has been very outspoken on this. Now, if you don't know a lot about the National Donate Life Month, it's where people are encouraged to check their organ donation status to make an impact on someone's life while they are here or after they pass away. Phil Palmisano, an organ donor himself, said this isn't a Democrat or a Republican issue and adds more needs to be done to get New York higher up on the donor ranking list. According to Donate Life America, more than 100,000 people are currently on the national transplant waiting list, and nearly 6,000 Americans died in 2022 waiting for a transplant. The organization says that your organs could save up to 8 lives. Your corneas could help 2 people regain their sight, and tissue donations could help 75 people. Now, I know this isn't something you necessarily want to think about, but I wanted to pass along to you. And if Phil is able to come on Friday, and it's not about Phil, he wants to be on. He was contacting me, but it's a matter of what's happening in Albany, and I think that's anybody's guess. So if he is, we'll make sure to highlight National Donate Life Month. If you want to find out more, it's donatelife.ny.gov. Donatelife.ny.gov. Okay, we have so many comments here. Okay, we will get to those in just a moment. Okay, let me see if I'm going to try this one quick. Is it me or just me thinking outside the box? Aren't there many similar traits between Tiffany Henyard and our illustrious Governor Kathy Hochul? If you're just joining us or you're not sure who Tiffany Henyard is, Tiffany Henyard is the super mayor, or what is the town's name? Dolan Dictator. She is, do the research yourself. I'm probably bringing her up too much on the program, but it's just, to me, a prime, maybe like the poster child, no pun intended, because she put posters up of herself all over town, paid for by taxpayers' money, but the poster child for making the wrong pick when you're voting. I mean, the corruption in government. And I call it the Barney Fife mentality only because, you know the old character on Andy Griffith, but you get that little taste of power. And boy, in her case, the money has been flowing like water. And now we hear of her silencing someone who may have been sexually assaulted. The list goes on and on. The story gets wilder. And I hate to say it because I think it would almost be something she would look forward to. But boy, it almost seems like a movie in the making, doesn't it? Which is probably what she ultimately wanted. Hey, going back to New York for just a moment. Politico highlights day 2 of the budget being late in New York. The stars are aligning, and that's good or bad news for the budget, depending on who you ask. And this is why I mentioned it. I hadn't even thought of this. Everybody's talking about the solar eclipse, of course. It's a big deal. If I have to hear another story about glass safety, and my goodness, it's nonstop. Do you want me to go through the 30-second PSA that everybody's been talking about with glasses? And I think by now I would hope. But so many places of employment are saying, okay, you get this half an hour off, or, we're going to take a little break and go look up in the sky. Well, of course, and we actually had the story for you yesterday where those inmates are suing so that they can see the solar eclipse. They believe it's their constitutional right, even though they're in jail behind bars, to be able to see the solar eclipse. So there's no surprise that those in Albany want the same deal. I've heard of a lot of people wanting to not meet during the eclipse, said Assembly member Joe Ann Simon, a Brooklyn Democrat. It's not just lawmakers saying that. There's a lot of people asking the same thing. Everybody wants to be out. State Senator Roxanne Prasad, a Brooklyn Democrat, quipped. On Monday, Governor Hochul blamed the now 2 days late budget on the Easter Bunny. Quote, if you did not have Easter Sunday being the deadline, I think we could have meant it. I really do. Now there's grumblings that they want Monday off because of the eclipse. It's like kids in like summer break, right before summer break. Why? Well, it's a once-in-a-lifetime phenomenon, and large gatherings are a good way for the members to score points with constituents if they are back home with them, rather than plugging away on an already late state budget. But Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins spoke with Politico and shot that idea down. The plan is so far to be here on Monday. Carl Heastie saying we may have to go look at it on the roof. State Senator Andrew Gennards was firm in his prediction the eclipse will come and go before a budget deal is reached. Maybe seeing the eclipse will inspire us to get the job done. Maybe there's some magic to the eclipse and budget being born together. I see them take it. I don't see too many people in the Capitol taking their vote seriously during that. Solar eclipse. So yes, I do believe that will lead to, why not, a couple more days off. This is exactly what we predicted on the show. You move it to the 4th, and then, well, we already moved to the 4th. Let's move it to the, you name it. Next thing you know, we're probably looking at May or June. Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe they'll pass it today. What do I know? Stay with us. We got to take a short break. We got a lot of comments coming in. Thank you for all the waves this morning. And then we'll be right back. Wow, we are moving fast. Who would have thought 2 hours would move just as fast as 1 hour? Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking. We are back with Frankly Speaking, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. Thank you for joining us this morning. So a couple things to get to, a couple comments from viewers. We were talking about Iran and this threat of essentially World War III early on in the program, and Ken has a very good point on this. It is terrifying, the thought of war that would bring us into a boots-on-the-ground conflict, especially, given the current circumstances. 250,000 illegal immigrants embedded in America. That may be even low, Ken, with some of the numbers we've seen. Hundreds of thousands of gotaways illegally in the country. Yes, there is a piece, and I did not intend to bring this up already, and maybe we'll bring it up more extensively. But GOP lawmakers are demanding answers because a known terrorist spent years in the United States after being wrongly released by the feds. I have all these type of stories, numerous stories in that manner. So you're right on that. Hundreds of thousands of gotaways illegally in the country. Our military equipment and munitions at lower amounts than normal due to helping Ukraine and Israel. 4, military recruitment has decreased below normal, and there's a lot of reasons for that. I know we've had discussions in the past, but you've got this woke mentality that you're seeing where people are saying it's not worth it because we're being taught all these things that have nothing to do with what our actual job would be. And that also leads to a weakness, or at least a perceived weakness from our military forces of, why focus on these woke seminars as compared to what your ultimate job is. And 5, if war breaks out, would the party in power be able to institute martial law and stop elections? Good point. Thank you, Ken. A lot going on there. None of it good, right? I do think when we show that kind of weakness that we did with the withdrawal from Afghanistan, people talk about Trump, and I think there's one thing you've got to think about when you think about Trump, whether you love him or hate him. It doesn't matter for this argument I'm about to make or this question I'm going to pose to you. Did you know, could you even predict what he would do if something like this happened? If October 7th happened while he was in office? If Iran did, heaven forbid, essentially start World War III with an attack on Israel, what would Trump have done? Now, maybe if you're leaning against Trump, or would he have dropped the bomb? Your guess is as good as mine. And that's the exact thing that other leaders, quote-unquote leaders, were thinking at the same time too. that I have no idea how to predict this attitude. And that obviously is going to scare someone in leadership thinking, wait a minute, do I really want to bite off more than I can chew? Now we have, as Ken has pointed out, 4, 5, 6 different things that really signal trouble if, heaven forbid, something were to happen. And I don't see why, at this point, the way China is headed, wanting to be the world superpower, why during at least the Biden administration they wouldn't make their move on Taiwan and like that. And I don't want them to. But I just don't see a strong response coming back from the United States. And boy, I hope I'm wrong. I hope you can point back to this episode and say, nope, Frank was exactly wrong. But we'll wait till that time comes. I do have to take another break, but not for just a little bit. And the next hour, we're going to talk a little bit more about Carl Heastie. I know we talked about him a lot yesterday, but this idea that punishment isn't a deterrent. We've got a few things on him because there's a really good piece at the New York Post by Michael Goodwin on this. Carl Heastie removed any doubt he's a political imbecile and a driving force for all of New York City's plight. And I know it says New York City here, but it's really about New York in general, and you'll see that in a little bit. We've got a couple other New York issues. Let me ask you this. Oh, I forgot to read. Oh, my goodness. It got mixed up in my paperwork. This was from a viewer yesterday. I have to believe that the Democrats will be throwing Biden under the bus soon. Now that the JFK Jr. quote about Biden being a bigger threat to democracy is out there, there will be groups using it in ads. The Democrats are about to come unglued. I cannot believe. I thought about this probably too much yesterday. I really cannot believe CNN put him on to do an interview. Because every time he's been on something, whether it's a Super Bowl ad, whether it's an interview like this, like he's done quite a few with Fox News, he seems to grow in popularity. So I still don't know the reasoning because I was only able to read the transcript. So I don't know exactly what the reasoning was on CNN. I don't want them not to have him on. I'm just shocked that they did. At a time when they tell us that they can't platform certain people, give a platform to certain people, which I think will ultimately be their excuse for Trump, as I've said a million times, why they won't show his rallies or why they won't give him a town hall or why Biden will probably use it as an excuse not to have a debate. But I'm talking about the media here specifically. I think the media uses that term, we can't give him a platform for his lies, and it'll be a way for them to silence him as we near November. I think Ronna McDaniel and that experience with NBC shows the direction, though it'll be a lot more forceful, but it shows the direction that they would be headed. You'll have a Chuck Todd stand up, because we saw it already. Them yelling at their bosses when it was at CNN. They had a town hall with Trump, and all the anchors and hosts came out and said, this is disgraceful. I think it was Anderson Cooper, we owe our viewers an apology. Yes, you owe your viewers an apology for having what looked like it was going to be the nominee, and ultimately it is going to be the nominee for the presidency of the United States on the Republican ticket, having them on your airwaves. I'm sure if you went on and looked at their 24-hour coverage, sure there's some time that they could cut out some stories that were worth cutting out to have the former president of the United States on their airwaves. But that was another tangent. That's kind of what we're having. I'm having a good time this morning. I hope you are as well. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. And we are back with Frankly Speaking. I've got to offer up a correction. I'm sorry I missed your follow-up email. Ken, you're right. We were talking about the potential for World War III, and Ken had said that it was a terrifying thought if there was boots on the ground conflict. Because, number one, there's 25,000 illegal immigrants from China embedded in America. Yeah, I thought the number was low. When I thought it was just illegal immigrants, I said, boy, it's a lot more than that. There's more than that in New York City. So the China part was added. Thank you, Ken. I apologize. I was a little late on the uptake on that one. 25,000 illegal immigrants from China embedded in America. Hundreds of thousands of gotaways illegally in the country. Our military equipment and munitions at lower amounts than normal due to helping Ukraine and Israel. Military recruitment has decreased below normal. And if war breaks out, would the party in power be able to institute martial law and stop elections? That's from Ken. Thank you, Ken. Okay, I know this hour's already through. Isn't it fun having an extra hour on this program? Because we have so much to cover every morning that it becomes easier and easier. I have some wild stories to get to. We were talking about RFK Jr. I don't know how much we're going to continue to get to him every day, but there is one quick story I may get to. This, I will read a little bit of it later on, but I'll ask you this question, pose it now, and get your thoughts. A lot of people I know were not too happy with Mitch McConnell. I'll be honest, I think Mitch McConnell, when it comes to tactically at times, was very brilliant. I think there's also things that I'm not crazy about, but I think he did a lot more behind the scenes than maybe we realize. But this is a little too much for me in a way. But Isaac Shore from the Post, not ask a question, but I'll pose it as a question. Kudos to Mitch McConnell's final public service, confronting the isolationist right. And he goes on to suggest that Mitch McConnell deserves praise for kind of calling out what he sees as the Trump factor, and I guess an isolationist mentality. In the interview, he said he'd be spending his last leg of public life confronting the advocates of a more laissez-faire American foreign policy. Quote, I'm particularly involved in actually fighting back against the isolationist movement in my own party and some in the other as well. And the symbol of that lately is, are we going to help Ukraine or not? I've got this on my mind, and for the next couple of years is something I'm going to focus on. So what's your thoughts on Mitch McConnell? When we come back, we're going to talk about Carl Heastie. And again, this idea that punishment is not a deterrent. I hope you'll stay with us for the next full hour, because I try not to cover too much of the same topics. It comes up a little bit, especially when we're having these great conversations with viewers. So it does come up a little bit, but not extensively. I'm not repeating the whole first hour. We just may reference something that we mentioned in the 6 o'clock hour. So there we go. We're learning the extra hour on the go just like you are. I know that alarm sounds a little bit louder earlier in the morning like that, though, doesn't it? So, as always, you see the number on the bottom of your screen. You can reach out at any time, weigh in on these topics and much more. I said on tomorrow's program, I know I said it already, I should say, former Congressman Joe Sempolinski will be our guest. So if you have any questions for the former congressman, current candidate for assembly, and also the current chair of the Steuben County Republican Party. If you have any questions for Joe, get those questions into me. If you want to get involved in politics, he's the one to ask. So get those questions to me whenever you'd like. We'll be right back with hour number 2 of Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, please stay with us. Welcome to hour 2 of Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acomb. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. And if you are just joining us, you've missed a lot already, but we're going to try to fill you in as best as we can. Here's a great comment. Can't wait to see Joe. Yeah, I like it. Joe Sempolinski is going to be on the program tomorrow. And I'm not sure what his schedule is, actually. But I think, last we talked, well, I know he's going to be on the show at 7. Last I talked, I think it will be in studio. So we always appreciate having Joe in. So get your questions in ahead of time. Okay. Carl Heastie, and I've been promoting this all morning long. This is from Michael Goodwin. Carl Heastie removed any doubts. He's a political imbecile and a driving force for all of New York City's plight. And I read that at first and I said, New York City? I think it's all of New York. And I think Michael Goodwin essentially gets to that. Now he's done it. Assemblyman Speaker Carl Heastie, normally a man of few words, has made the grave mistake of opening his mouth and revealing what's behind the blank facade. It's not a pretty sight. In doing so, Heastie proved the wisdom of the warning that it is better to remain silent at the risk of being thought a fool than to talk and remove all doubt of it. While the suspicion about him have been confirmed, calling Heastie a fool doesn't capture the significance of what he said and the policy impacts on the life of every New Yorker. See, I don't know why they focus on New York City in the headline, but it really is every New Yorker. His declaration that I just don't believe raising penalties is ever a deterrent on crime amounts to a holy grail of political imbecility, I guess is how you'd say that. Everything bad about New York, the mayhem, the criminal coddling, the cold shoulder for taxpayers, is at least partially a result of his strange thinking. And those are some of the most major issues and concerns to voters. Mayhem, criminal coddling, not treating taxpayers with respect. Heastie and his fellow travelers in Albany and City Hall don't have a clue about human nature and therefore the necessity of certain punishment that fits the crime. His confession lays bare the fact that he is so out of touch with reality that he ought to have the decency to slink out of office and into oblivion. He's ostensibly from the Bronx, but might as well be living on the moon. Otherwise, how can he fail to grasp the obvious fact that more people who are locked up are deterred during their time behind bars from committing more crimes? Right. I mean, just that fact alone. I mean, you look at bail reform. If those people were in jail, let's say, those extra victims would not have happened. Those extra crimes would not have been committed. That's just at base level. And has he ever considered the possibility that they will be so, disturbed by their experience in prison that they will go straight when they are eventually released? That too is deterrence. Tragically, Hastie's willful ignorance is standard fare on the left, where a whole generation of the best and the brightest are proving themselves to be lacking even a shred of common sense. Society to them is nothing more than a game of racial bean counting. Because he has a life or death, this is what's really important. This is another reason why I wanted to bring this up. Because Heastie has a life or death grip on every piece of legislation that moves or doesn't move in Albany, his admission illustrates why lawmakers have allowed and even encouraged the waves of crime and public disorder that are destroying New York. The lenient bail laws, the handcuffing of judges, the raising of the age from 16 to 18 for young offenders to be treated as adults, they all play a role in the coddling of criminals and the victimization of the innocent. Victimization of the innocent. What a great way of putting that. And also, when we talk about the coddling of criminals in that age range that they just mentioned, where we've seen time and time again young people being recruited to gangs to do the really bad, dirty work because they will not get the punishment. The murder of police officer Jonathan Diller by a career criminal who, along with his partner, has racked up at least 35 combined arrests underscores the devastating impact Heastie and his Democrat collaborators are having. The demonization of police, the ruinous squeeze on taxpayers, the dumbing down of schools, the obsession with promoting transgenderism are the bitter fruits of the progressive agenda in Washington, Albany, and City Hall. And this is coming from Michael Goodwin. The agenda includes the shocking levels of anti-Semitism that emerged on elite college campuses and on city streets after the Hamas terror attack on Israel. Jew hatred is not unique to the far left, but is far more common there. Heastie made his startling remarks in reaction to a push from Governor Hochul to crack down on the explosion of retail thefts, which is leading many stores to close and costing employees their jobs. Despite the context, there is no reason to believe the speaker's warped thinking is limited to one category of crime. His record proves he has applied the same illogic to all kinds of crimes, even violent ones. Quote, "We care very deeply about that," he said of the epidemic of shoplifting in stores ranging from pharmacies to high-end clothing and jewelry stores, many of which involved assault on workers. And there's actually a piece of here from the Post as well. Retail workers that work around Carl Hastie's New York City office constantly fear being attacked on the job. I'm scared all the time, they're saying. So yes, going into this. Yet the more he talked, the more it was clear he doesn't actually care that much about the victims. His tortured logic sounds as if he's in a futile search for a social program that will prevent people from turning to a life of crime without penalizing those who do. So yes, trying to look for that social program, throw that money at the issue that will magically erase someone from becoming a career criminal. It sounds as if Heastie does not believe that the threat of serious consequences is a fundamental part of prevention. If that's his position, I'd like to hear him name a single society that survived for long when there was crime without punishment. As Michael Goodwin said, sadly, no matter how honest you think you are, you may still consider robbing a bank if there is no risk of punishment. And he said, I might even be tempted to join them. That's Michael Goodwin. Meanwhile, thanks to extremists like Heastie, New York is already proving the point that crime actually creates poverty. We are still relatively early in this leftist revolution of our history, laws, and culture, but already some impacts are clear. Among them is the hemorrhaging of taxpayers, both the wealthy and middle class, who have decided that New York is no longer worth the price, the hassle, or the danger. Studies show the outflow includes black families too, with the overall black population declining. And then Michael Goodwin quotes a friend of his who one time made a point, and it's a good point, a two-parent family with a combined income of $300,000 or so. Let's say they leave the city. Let's say they leave your town. The impact on the neighborhood is like that of a small business closing. The supermarkets, delis, pharmacies, dry cleaners, and other stores where they shopped lost good customers. Real estate lost a potential buyer or renter, and local schools lost a student. And there is no end in sight, thanks to Heastie's ilk in Albany and City Hall, because they are so bizarre, Heastie's words could become legendary. So I thought that was a really good piece. Wow, look at all these comments that we're receiving. We'll get to those in just a second. But I thought that was a really good piece by Michael Goodwin, as they're dealing with this in New York City, of course, but we're dealing with it. Look, for instance, the story we brought up all week at Fast Track, where the lady tried to set Fast Track on fire, allegedly. Do I have to say allegedly? Set them on fire, and then tried to threaten people, and she was out on her own recognizance, I think the next morning. So, yeah, retail workers around Heastie's New York City office are constantly in constant fear of being attacked. How can you not feel fear? I'm scared all the time. It could happen to me too. Others saying we're scared every time. I have to keep the door locked and check to see if they have ski masks on. That's a worker at Verizon who was once threatened with a knife when he confronted a shoplifter. Said his store has been hit by a gun-wielding perp 4 times in the past year alone. And this is businesses. This is retail right near Carl Heastie's New York City office. They're getting bail so easy, they should be getting jail time. I mean, we can go through all this. They're saying the same thing so many are. And you feel for those retail workers who are out there in a job that's not, they're not making a fortune necessarily, but it's a good job. And now their life is on the line in many instances because of decisions made by people like Carl Heastie. Okay, talk more about that when we come back. Don't want to run late. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking. I'm running around like a chicken with my head cut off this morning, trying to get all these comments. Thank you for all these wonderful comments coming in and bringing this story to my attention. First off, bringing this story to my attention, if I can get all my paperwork in order. And by the way, we're broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. This is Frankly Speaking, Hour 2. A Palestinian-American doctor walked out of a meeting with President Joe Biden before it was over Tuesday evening, underscoring the high tensions, angers, and concern from Arab, Palestinian, and Muslim American communities amid the Israel-Hamas war. Dr. Thayer Ahmad, an emergency physician from Chicago who traveled to Gaza earlier this year, told CNN he abruptly left the meeting that included Vice President Harris, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, other administration officials, and a small group of Muslim community leaders. While the president has often faced protests and interruptions at public events in the last several months, Ahmad's decision to leave the meeting is perhaps the most intimate moment of protest the president has faced to date. Do they have any statements from him? I don't know. But there you go. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Next, I asked a question about Mitch McConnell. I think Mitch McConnell was mostly an old school politician that believed in working the best interest of the American people, which means reaching across the aisle to get things done. More recently, he has distanced himself from Trump, I think in an attempt to try to find a way forward in this politically divided environment. That is a good point. How about this one? Frank, I saw you in Wegmans yesterday and want to tell you what a rock star you are. Yeah, okay. But then I remember that it was tax season and you were probably in a hurry to get to the alcohol section. Yeah. You're not that far off because I have not done my taxes. So thank you for that. I wish you would have said hi. Next time, please do. Anything. Whoa, in all that time. Sorry, I'm getting flustered with all this. I really appreciate all the comments. Okay, here we go. At the risk of sounding like a hater, if my tax dollars now go to fund eclipse watching inmates, legal fees, that would be a new low. They're inmates for a reason. We have privileges removed when we commit crimes. That's the point. Well, I don't know. I've talked to Heastie about that. I don't know if he would agree that that's necessary. But yes, the legal fees, there will be. And I was going to print out this morning. Now I wish I would have. They had what was it, 5 or 6 people that are on this lawsuit, what they were not accused of, found guilty of committing, and it's some of the worst of the worst. So yes, I think that would be a new low in what seems like a constant flow of new lows. Chuck Schumer is calling on the DOJ to use the RICO Act to stop organized retail theft in New York. Now, I'm sorry, I didn't think the RICO Act was like really used for crime, according to AOC. So maybe I'm confused here. But Schumer says communities across New York, including in Rochester, Ontario County, the Hudson Valley, and more, have seen millions in merchandise stolen from stores, which is hurting local businesses and shoppers by causing prices to rise and making access to goods more difficult. Really? You don't say. How annoying is it, too, by the way? I don't blame anybody for this. Well, I mean, businesses-wise. I blame people for it, but not businesses. How annoying is it when you need something small and you have to call over an attendant because it's all locked up, like a razor or something like that? Of course, this is all part of this. Don't get me wrong, but boy, it becomes kind of unwieldy when you just want to stop in to the store real quick. We're here today because in Rochester and Ontario County, stores like those here at the Victor Cross Shopping Plaza are on the front lines of a growing trend we're seeing across America. It's organized retail theft. A lot of these crime rings are national. For instance, right here, Ulta stores have been robbed across the country. Schumer states that $100,000 worth of products were stolen from this one individual store between 2023 and today. This coming from Wendy Wright. National RICO will allow our feds to come in and pursue things. RICO has a lot of advantages. A, it crosses state lines. B, it has tougher penalties. And C, it uses a long arm of the federal government to put evidence together in different places that can convict these crime rings under the RICO statute. Under the RICO statute. Again, it's interesting how AOC. Anyway, I don't want to go back into that. But it has tougher penalties. To Chuck Schumer's point, that's nice that you say that, but is tougher penalties really going to do anything? Is tougher penalties, it's not a deterrent, right? Trump has called for cop killers to get mandatory death sentences in the wake of the slaying of Jonathan Diller. The presumptive Republican presidential nominee was speaking at a campaign rally in Green Bay, Wisconsin, where he called on Congress to pass legislation to ensure that those convicted of killing a police officer receive capital punishment, just days after he attended Diller's wake. He said, quote, "I will ask Congress to send a bill to my desk ensuring that anyone who murders a police officer will receive immediately the death penalty. We're going to do that, and you'll see the whole situation come to a halt." And that drew a standing ovation at the rally. I would pose that question for you. What do you think? I know at one point there was kind of controversy over different laws like this because there's different, people would say, well, why is it different than anybody being murdered? Those type of things. So I would, it's got a standing ovation. I would just pose the question to you. Trump has supported executing convicted cop killers repeatedly since at least 2015 during his first White House run when he vowed to sign an executive order giving anybody killing a police officer the death penalty. So that all ties in together. One last New York issue, because why not? Just to put it all into perspective. 2 Bronx squatters, we've been talking a lot about squatters, were found with guns, drugs, and a long list of criminal history. They were set free following arraignment, and according to this piece, leaving police officials irate. 2 recidivist offenders were among a group of armed individuals found squatting in a Bronx home with a serious cache of firearms and illicit drugs, police officers said. The 8 people were located illegally residing in a home. We don't need to know where the home is. Among the group were 2 individuals who had been previously arrested in the past year for serious felonies, and despite the additional charges stemming from last week's incidents, ready for this, wound up back out on the streets without bail yet again. Chief of Patrol John Schell said 2 days later, in the midst of all this, the cops are still working, confronting people with firearms who shouldn't have been there. Yeah, at a time when so many politicians lecture us about gun control and taking guns out the street, why are there no penalties in these instances? Just like with the Jonathan Diller case. That guy was out on the street. The alleged murderer was out on the street after having gun charges brought up against him. I don't understand that. It's tough to say that you're tough on guns and you want, gun control and these type of things, if you're not even enforcing the laws on the books or not penalizing those that have been found guilty of misusing firearms. My nose is stuffed up this morning. I apologize. All right. Well, that's perfect. Perfect timing because I got to take a break anyway. But yes, there you go. 2 Bronx squatters found with guns, drugs, and criminal histories back out on the street following the arraignment. Let's take our next short break as I get a little glass of water here. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, please stay with us. Thank you again for joining us here on Frankly Speaking as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio on Market Street in Corning. I'm your host, Frank Acomb. We've received so many comments this morning. I like this too. Phil, meaning Phil Palmisano, is like a superhero, flying to save the region from chaos. There we go. And all your other ideas I like as well in the future, absolutely. And next comment, Frank, you need to drink beer, not water. It quenches your thirst and keeps you from getting dry mouth. Yes, well, let me tell you, if I had a beer starting at the 6 o'clock hour, it would be a very interesting, Frankly Speaking, by the end of the 2-hour broadcast, I'm sure. So thank you for all the comments. I appreciate it. But even during tax season, to the other viewers' comment, if you're just joining us, that was not where I was headed in Wegmans, but I appreciate it. Hey, how about this? Completely unrelated from anything we've been bringing up. I don't know what age you are, if you're starting to think, man, maybe I could seriously start thinking about retirement. Do you know what the magic number for retirement is now, according to experts? Now, there's no single formula, but what they are saying, it would take $1.46 million to retire comfortably, according to a recent survey. I think many of you right now are, a little lightheaded after hearing that number, or maybe saying, well, I missed that. Nowhere near that. Can you imagine that? $1.46 million to retire comfortably. Now that's up from $1.27 million a year ago and over $1 million more than the average survey's participants' nest egg. So I guess that may be the people that they surveyed wishful thinking. Yeah, sure, I could live comfortably off $1.46 million. I could live off $1.2 billion. I mean, if we're all making up numbers, why not? We've talked about drug issues here in New York State so often. We've talked about the disastrous rollout of legalized cannabis and the like. Well, Oregon, which kind of became a central focus of decriminalization of drugs. Did you hear how that backfired? Oregon has approved a state law that recriminalizes drug possession. The law rolls back an experimental policy, the most liberal drug measure in the United States, that made possession for personal use a ticketed offense with a fine up to $100. The new legislation penalizes those possessing small amounts of drug with probation and up to 180 days in jail. The governor said the state still aims to provide a path for drug treatment rather than punishing drug users. So recriminalizing, because it was everything. Everything was okay, decriminalized. Rehabilitation and destigmatization was the intention of the original law known as Measure 110 when it was passed in 2020 by vote. By a spike in the number of overdoses a spike in the number of overdoses caused lawmakers and supporters to backtrack. Measure 110 was seen by many as the most liberal effort in the U.S. to decriminalize drugs like cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine. Okay. This is the part where I think we're just going to go through a lot of different topics. How am I doing? Good. Let's give this a shot. If the Dems actually supported laws and tough penalties targeting criminals that used guns during illegal activities, that would push gun crimes down and take the wind out of their efforts to disarm all of America. Well, and that's my point. Thank you, Ken. That's my point. It goes to show that how disingenuous they are and that it's just political talking points. Because if they were really, quote unquote, tough on guns, wouldn't you say, wait a minute, this person got arrested for illegal gun possession? Really, if you want to go back to it, this is a bridge too far, but shouldn't there have been more of a penalty for Hunter Biden for tossing that gun, just throwing it away? It's the same kind of idea here. You've got people being arrested for illegal gun, what would you even call it? Not purchase, gun purchases, but having guns on them illegally and getting no punishment for it. The man who allegedly killed Officer Dillon was literally Dillard. Did I say Dylan? Sorry, that was flashback yesterday to Gunsmoke. Was on the street after an illegal, being ticketed with an illegal gun ownership or whatever the word is. I'm drawing a blank on it. But also, they had a long, lengthy history before that as well. It wasn't a one and done, you made one mistake once in your life. Possession. It just came to me. Illegal gun possession. Jeez. Sorry. 2 hours drains you a little bit, folks. All right, moving along here. Yeah, we talked about Mitch McConnell. Yeah, you can weigh in on that if you want. Truckers are challenging Joe Biden and his administration over the climate crackdown on electric big rigs. American truck drivers are sounding the horn on the Biden administration's recently finalized environmental regulations that aim to push for the heavy-duty vehicle sector to go all electric. The truckers voiced concerns that electric heavy-duty vehicle technology is not nearly advanced enough to replace the nation's existing diesel-powered fleet, noting limitations on vehicle batteries, like low performance in cold weather conditions and shorter range. They also warned that the lack of high-powered charging infrastructure and power grid upgrades needed for fueling vehicles would present additional problems. And this is the same problem we've discussed. I know this is about big rigs, but we talked about it as well when it comes to the EV buses. The EBs, would you call them that? Electric buses for the school districts. The technology is not there. The power is not there when it comes to the grid. And then, as you mentioned here, with cold weather. Well, we have some very cold weather here in upstate New York. And what does that mean for school? Will school be canceled on a more consistent basis? There's a lot of questions. I'm an owner-operator. I've been in the business for 30 years, said Mike Nichols. Even if they subsidize the cost of electric vehicles 100%, I still would refuse because I would still go broke. That's how useless they are. If they gave me one of those things, I still wouldn't take it. EV trucks don't do as much work. They're heavier, so they can't haul as much. They don't go as far. They take longer to charge. So you're going to need more trucks on the roads, which is completely the opposite of what we would want if we were actually concerned about bettering our society. Now, on Friday, the EPA finalized the regulators, which kick in beginning in 2026 for model year 2027. The regulations gradually become more stringent through model year 2032, affecting short-haul and long-haul tractor-trailer trucks and vocational trucks like delivery vehicles, schools, and public transit buses and garbage trucks, concrete trucks, and fire trucks. Wow, think about that. So you talk about maybe your town taxes, your county taxes. Think of all the vehicles that will need to be replaced there as well. So we tie that in, and New York is even stricter now. Keep that in mind. So New York, we're going to have the cost as taxpayers when it comes to the buses for our schools, and on top of that, of all our municipalities needing new worker vehicles. I don't know where it comes from. And let's just go back to it. The grid is not there. The technology is not there. So you can virtue signal as much as you want and feel like you're doing something, but that does not mean at the end of the day it can be done. And the sad thing is, it's almost as if they won't take no for an answer. Even if it can't be done, you will just have to suffer until the technology, I guess, catches up. I don't even know what the term would be. So you'll have the days where you can't start your car to go into work because it's too cold, or you'll have those hour-long spent at a charging station when you have other things that you could be doing to charge your battery, or you won't be able to go on that trip because it'll take too long, etc., etc. Okay, we got to take a break. Stay with us. Keep those comments coming in. We've been receiving a lot of great comments. We're moving fast this morning. Loving the new 2 hours. What do you think? Have you been able to catch some of the 6 o'clock hour? I know it's getting into the different schedules. So, same here, but I think we're having fun with it. As I mentioned, and as been commented, Joe Sempolinski will be on the program tomorrow. Also, we're trying to get Assemblyman Phil Palmisano in on Friday. And the reason I say trying to get is only because it depends on what's going on in Albany. He wants to be here as soon as he possibly can, when he knows as much as he possibly can. But we're waiting all to hear what's going to happen in Albany. So if he can make it, we will let you know. It may be a game time decision. So again, stay tuned as always. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. Well, it's a rainy view, but it's still a beautiful view of Marcus Street as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. All right, another question posed to you. I know we talk about RFK Jr. quite a bit, and he's been receiving, I don't know if you'd even say backlash, but a lot of coverage. Yeah, kind of backlash. A lot of coverage of his comment that Biden is a bigger threat to democracy than Trump. Well, yesterday, and this is from the New York Post, he pledged, to pardon American hero Ed Snowden if elected. That's his term. I'm going to build a statue to him. Edward Snowden, and this is an exact quote. It's not me. Edward Snowden is an American hero. Instead of jailing Snowden, I'm going to build a statue to him and maybe to WikiLeaks' Julian Assange somewhere near the Washington Press Club or perhaps outside the CIA headquarters in Langley as a civics lesson to the Republic. Snowden, who has been in exile for more than a decade, performed a critical public service by revealing that our government had been spying on millions of law-abiding American citizens in violation of numerous laws and our fundamental right to privacy. The America I love doesn't punish whistleblowers. Truth-tellers who champion free speech and try to return America to its democratic and humanitarian ideals should be revered, not prosecuted. So these are some of the things that they'll highlight when it comes to RFK Jr., to say that he's, I don't know, more fringe, for lack of a better term. But I just wanted to hear I'm not going to weigh in on it. I just wanted to hear what you had to say because that was another big interview he gave yesterday. Moving right along. How many things can we cover in 2 hours? It's almost remarkable how many various topics that we have that you can't find elsewhere. I don't even know where to. Okay, one other thing. Let's say this. One other thing to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and this will tie in if we get a chance to talk more about Israel. But Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and you remember John Fetterman, controversial figure for a while because he always wanted to wear just a hoodie in the Senate chambers, and he had all the health issues. Kind of been out of the limelight lately. But both their support of Israel make them political gadflies to today's left. This is coming from the Wall Street Journal. It says McGurn analyzed Kennedy Jr. McGurn is William McGurn from the Wall Street Journal, analyzed Kennedy Jr. and Fetterman's pro-Israel posture in contrast to increasingly mainstream pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel views of the modern left in an opinion piece. Yeah, that really, and it's a polite way of putting it, but that is, I really think, the majority now in the Democrat Party, or at least those in Washington, that it is a pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel view. You've seen, well, let's face it, Chuck Schumer trying to interfere in that election. So I think that's a really good point. Each is a man of the left. This is a piece from the Wall Street Journal, which has become increasingly hostile to Israel. Pressure from left has led both Biden and Chuck Schumer to temper support for Israel with unprecedented public criticism of the country's elected government and its war efforts. The criticisms are striking because they come on the eve of an offensive in Rafah that Israel deems essential to root out the Hamas leadership and destroy its ability to inflict another attack like October 7th. Fetterman and Kennedy might have been expected to succumb to progressive pressure, but they didn't. The question for a post-Joe Lieberman Democrat Party is whether the Fetterman-Kennedy resistance marks a restoration of support for Israel to its place in American liberalism or a dying last gasp. Well, it sounds more like, unfortunately, a dying last gasp, right? Because Fetterman has a little bit of a name for himself because it was kind of an odd story. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is doing fine as a third-party candidate, but still right around the 10% number. So I don't think it's all of a sudden a resurgence in pro-Israel stance from the Democrat Party. I think, unfortunately, it is a dying last gasp. And again, that's coming from the Wall Street Journal's William McGurn. But I did think that was an interesting point. Saying here, it's telling that the Fetterman-Kennedy position today makes them political gadflies. A generation ago, they would have been mainstream liberals firmly in the Democrat orbit. Then again, Lieberman lost his last Democratic primary to a candidate who ran to his left on foreign policy, and he died promoting the centrist No Labels Party. Kind of an interesting take on it. We got a lot of comments coming in, so I'm going to take a break so I can make sure to read all those comments. We'll see if we can get to all of them when we come back. Keep the comments coming in. We're jumping all around this morning. So much to talk about. So many things to discuss. Again, Joe Semplinsky on the program tomorrow. Potentially Assemblyman Phil Palmisano on Friday. We're going to be talking with Joe from the Crystal Chords, our favorite. They did their group and fellow groups did so great on the Salvation Army Telethon and the Christmas special. I can't wait to talk to her about their upcoming show, which I shouldn't just keep saying it. I should be showing it. We Got the Music in Me coming up on April 6th, starting at 7 p.m. It's the Crystal Chords, a Mark Twain chorus, and that'll be at the Clemens Center, downtown Elmira, New York. We'll be talking to Joe. I believe it's on tomorrow's program, maybe Friday's program, and then we'll be talking with a few other guests as well this week. We started the week without guests to see how the 2 hours would go, and now on the back end of the week, we're going to have a lot of guests. So make sure you tune in. Let me take that break. We'll be back with Frankly Speaking here at WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. We are back with Frankly Speaking. Boy, we're having a lot of fun this morning. So many great comments. I love this as part of the program. Can I just say that? I think it works so well that we can have this conversation back and forth. Here's another example. Fox News reporting suspected migrant squatters found in New York City apartment with child, face gun, drug charges. The New York City mayor says women being punched in the city shows corrosiveness of TikTok. Really? Thanks for all that. I was just reading that as we were going on the air, and I wanted to hear more. Here's a few other comments. Do you think they want the infrastructure upgraded to support an all-electric America? If we are forced to go all-electric without the infrastructure, think of the additional CO2 reduction associated with rolling blackouts. Electric power plants also emit CO2. I mean, that's a good point. It's going to lead to rolling blackouts like you see in the summer in Texas and elsewhere. I'm not sure I guess that would be a way to reduce carbon emission if we are in, the caveman times, I suppose. I don't know. Like Trump, here's another comment. Like Trump, RFK shows the crimes of the deep state players. Interesting point. I think Fetterman has realized what a sewer he's been elected to and seems to be speaking against his Democrat peers. They have silenced him recently, so we'll see if he stands strong or folds. That is a great point. And that, I didn't even really think to expand on that, but you're exactly right. Fetterman was kind of this weird poster child for some reason at one point, like this a new Washington. And the media loved reporting on the fact that he just wanted to wear hoodies. And then he had that health issue, and they said, how dare Republicans attack him because he doesn't seem healthy, and who cares if he wears a hoodie? And he's kind of like a golden child for a while. It was really strange. And then he had a couple of quotes, and I don't remember exactly what they were on, but didn't follow 100% in line with the Democrat agenda. And now he's been off the radar forever, hasn't he? Not forever, but he's been off the radar for quite some time as compared to the coverage he used to get. I guess they figure he stabbed him in the back. So I don't know if he cares about being silenced. I don't really care for this guy politically. I like that he's one of the Democrats supporting Israel in a way. And I say I'm glad that he's supporting Israel, but he is in a way. I'm just, overall, we're not politically aligned. So it's no skin off my teeth one way or the other. Having said that, it is interesting that they look as if they wanted to knock his celebrity status, if you will, down a peg. Next comment. Looking forward to hearing from Joe Semplinsky tomorrow. We always do. And, of course, it goes without saying, Frank Acomb and Frankly Speaking every day. Well, thank you. Joe Semplinsky is one of, I don't think we've had a bad guest yet, but Joe Semplinsky seems to be one of everybody's favorite guests because he offers so much insight as a former member of Congress, now a candidate for Assembly, and as the chairman of the Steuben County Republican Committee. All right, Trump vows, after we talked about this controversy all week, after Biden declares Trans Visibility Day on Easter, Trump vows to create a new holiday called Christian Visibility Day. Former President Trump vowed to create a Christian Visibility Day following President Biden's declaration of Transgender Day of Visibility. What the heck, we'll say. was Biden thinking when he declared Easter Sunday to be Trans Visibility Day? Trump asked his supporters. Such total disrespect for Christians. The presumptive Republican nominee for president promised that November 5th would be Christian Visibility Day if he is elected. And on November 5th, it's going to be called something else. You know, it's going to be called Christian Visibility Day, to thunderous applause. By the way, if you're not, I can't imagine you didn't get this by now. We brought it up in the 6 o'clock hour. Trump did win, and Biden as well, the New York primary. Did you go? Did you vote? It's not a criticism if you didn't. I know a lot of people figure why bother. I understand that. I did go. I think when I walked in at 1 o'clock for my polling place, I was number 18. So it was not lines around the block. I'll tell you that. Okay, sorry. I got to stop reading texts live on the air in my head. This is interesting. Yes, it is. It's still interesting, even though I don't have to take a break for a second. A key ally of Donald Trump, and I think this is important. I hope it gets the word out, filed a complaint Tuesday against a district judge out of Washington who appeared on CNN last week and took jabs at the former president. U.S. District Judge Reggie Walton went on the cable news network to discuss Trump's attacks on the judge overseeing his, quote, hush money case out of Manhattan. Mike Davis, he's the founder of Article 3 Project, which is an advocacy group that pushes for the nomination of conservative judges. He said, we are seeing a dangerous pattern in which D.C. federal judges like Reggie Walton have convinced themselves that they have a duty, unbounded by the judicial canons, to make extrajudicial pronouncements about President Trump. This is in a 13-page complaint. Davis's complaint was addressed to Chief Judge Sri Srinivasan of the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. He told the Post that his goal is for Walton to get reprimanded and to send a very clear message to other judges, especially in D.C., that they cannot take off their political robes and climb into the political arena. And that is a good point. You've heard me say on the past, I find it's not difficult. It's just different to interview judge candidates because there's certain things you can ask them and can't ask them. They can't come out and just state their opinion on something because it could, harm future trials and things like that. So it's interesting in this case that now, because it's Trump, these judges have no problem, even in this case, going on CNN and being a talking head for all intents and purposes. In his complaint, Davis highlighted a provision in the Code of Conduct for the U.S. judges that stipulates that judges have an obligation not to denigrate public confidence in the judiciary's integrity. It is much worse than when a different judge, especially a sitting federal judge, thinks it's in his job to moonlight as a CNN commentator on a pending criminal case in another judge's court. You can find the full piece for yourself at the New York Post. Senior Judge Reggie Walton saying, we do these jobs because we're committed to the rule of law and we believe in the rule of law, and the rule of law can only function effectively when we have judges who are prepared to carry out their duties without the threat of potential physical harm. Okay. Anyway, that's what he said on the show. All right. Let's see. How am I doing on time? We're doing good. Let's take another short break. That will be our last break of today's edition of Frankly Speaking. So get your last minute comments in. We'll try to get to as many of them as we possibly can. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acomb. We're broadcasting live from the Heastie studio. Thank you for joining us as we wrap up on today's edition. A couple quick comments from viewers. Yes, Hillary Clinton did tell voters to get over yourselves when it comes to the Biden-Trump rematch. If you are an undecided voter, you got to get over yourself. Very much reminiscent of the deplorable comment. She knows how to spin a phrase, doesn't she? Get over yourselves. Yes, there has been overwhelming support for the Chemung County investigator who's in critical condition. Our thoughts and prayers go out to his family. What a horrible story there at a time when, how much does this fit in? When we talk about shoplifting, when we talk about recidivism, talk about bail reform. So thank you for mentioning that. I appreciate you bringing that back because we mentioned it, I believe, on Monday's show. But yes, thank you for the reminder there. I talked about this earlier in the show, just to recap, because I didn't get an opportunity to talk much about it, but a known terrorist spent years in the United States after being wrongly released by the feds. A Somali terrorist was allowed into the country and was able to operate freely for almost a year before authorities realized their error and rearrested him. Republican lawmakers are demanding information from Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas about what happened to the man and whether U.S. citizens funded any part of his journey to or stay in the U.S. Wow. Yeah, the letter from Republican lawmakers seek to find the Al-Shahaba member's path from illegally crossing the border to Minnesota, where he was eventually rearrested in January, and whether he received any government benefits. It also seeks to find if he took a commercial flight with U.S. citizens to reach their state and if his travel was funded with taxpayer dollars, according to the letter. Oh, man. Next, a woke El Paso judge's order will provoke more border mobs. We're on immigration here for a moment. New York isn't the only town plagued by let-em-loose judges. You can even find one in Texas. On Sunday, El Paso judge Humberto Acosta ordered the release of members of the migrant mob charged with riot participation in that March 21st stampede, tearing down razor wire along the Rio Grande and bum-rushing the border. It's not clear how many migrants Acosta cleared to go, or whether the rioters who injured National Guard troops during the surge will also be freed, but the judge cited hundreds of arrestees whose right to individual detention hearings within 48 hours, was being violated. Violated because the surely overwhelmed district attorney's office failed to file the cases in time, prompting assistant district attorney to request that the hearings be held at a later date, which Acosta denied. Woke judges like Acosta ignore the spirit of the law while using the letter to embolden and enable lawbreakers. To see the fruits of that, look at the violent disorder in blue cities like New York, and expect more border-charging mobs once word spreads that the local judge is handing out get out of jail free cards. All right, are we out of time? We are nearly out of time here. Update from yesterday's story. We heard about LSU leaving during the national anthem. They ultimately lost that game, by the way, but leaving during the national anthem, and her excuse a lot of people are calling very weak. Like her answer is supposed to be better, that basically they didn't know. They have a schedule that really they always leave during the national anthem. She didn't put it that way, but they have a schedule where they leave at a certain time. It was a really weak response. Well, Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry is calling for policy changes after LSU women's basketball misses the national anthem. Landry wrote, "My mother coached women's high school basketball during the height of desegregation. No one has greater respect for the sport and for Coach Kim Mulkey. However, above respect for the game is a deeper respect for those that serve to protect and unite us under one flag. It is time that all college boards, including Regent, put a policy in place that student athletes be present for the national anthem or risk their athletic scholarship. This is a matter of respect that all collegiate coaches should instill." That was an update. And I think that covered everything I wanted to cover this morning. Wow. Yes, everything is building up here. A lot of comments I just don't think I'm going to have a chance to get to this morning. Thank you to everybody who joined us. As I keep mentioning, first of all, before I mention who our guests are, thank you so much. We had so much great back and forth this morning, so many great conversations. I cannot tell you how much it means to me when you take time out to, even if it's a wave or to comment on a story or highlight a story that I may not have seen. I always appreciate that. If you ever have a guest that you'd like to see on the program locally, you say, well, my mayor did this or my councilman did this, I'd like to hear about it. Can't guarantee I'll get that interview, but I'll try my hardest. So if you want to contact me with names as well. But for tomorrow's program, you can get questions in for former Congressman Joe Sempolinski, who will be on the show. He's also a current candidate for Assembly, and he is the current chair of the Steuben County GOP. So you can ask about any of those various topics. Also on Friday, it's not a guarantee yet. We're trying to work out the logistics, and it all depends on what in the world's going on in Albany. But if it is all possible, we'll have Assemblyman Phil Palmisano on. If not on Friday, he will be on as soon as he possibly can. He's made that a point that he wants to come on and talk about what's happening in Albany. So that is most likely Friday show. We're going to talk with Joe from the Crystal Chords about their upcoming show on April 6th at the Clemens Center. And I think that does it for me on guests. We are out of time. Have a great day, everyone. We will see you tomorrow morning, bright and early, starting at 6 a.m. with Frankly Speaking.